Let me jump in there for a second here. Two things that I've seen happen in the last couple of days here. One, Iran strikes Israel, and the other one, I've never heard Carl Zha so quiet in a live stream in my life. This is awesome. So we're sitting back, and we are, Scott, you are absolutely on fire tonight. This is exactly what the audience needs. We need to get up to speed with what's going on in that region. Carl, let's get on to some more questions. Maybe you want to add to some commentary, and I'll let you gentlemen share the screen, okay?
First of all, thank you, Scott, for that university level lecture. I'm sure everyone here appreciate and learn a ton. But I do have a question. I want to pose the lens back a little bit. What is Israel's end game? I mean, why is Israel trying to create the provocation in the first place against Iran, against Hezbollah? I mean, how does expanding the scope of the conflict help the long-term existence of Israel? Because for outsider like me looking in, it looks like Israel is on a suicidal path. It's what they're doing is not creating, far from creating like long-term stability. They're just trying to destabilize the whole region and blow up the Middle East, and they're trying to drag U.S. into it. But what is Israel's end game? I mean, am I just to assume Netanyahu is completely insane? I mean, is he just like don't care anymore? He just want to do whatever it takes to save his political ass, so he's willing to blow up the world for it? I mean, how? I maybe just take a stab, speculate. I'm just trying to understand what led us to this point.
We don't have to speculate. We know what their game is. Look, Benjamin Netanyahu comes from the political wing of Israel that doesn't believe in a Palestinian state, whether it's part of a two-state solution or a one-state solution. They don't believe in this at all. And Benjamin Netanyahu has made it his goal and objective to destroy the foundation of the potential of peace that had been built by Yitzhak Rabin in the Oslo Accords, Oslo 1, Oslo 2. As imperfect as they were heading Israel down a path that could have resulted in a viable Palestinian state in one shape or another. And Netanyahu and the Likud party said, no, we're not going to do that. Now, as Israel evolves over the years, understand this, that when Yitzhak Rabin was prime minister in the 1990s, the political demographics of Israel were far different than what they are today. Likud was a powerful party, but so was Labor. And Israel was populated by people that I would say were second and third generation removed from the Sabra, or the original settlers who created Israel. The original settlers were fanatics. We know this. We listened to Ben Gurion. We listened to, the other fathers of Israel, and we understand the extraordinary racism that existed as they talked about, eliminating Palestine, driving the Palestinians from their homes. They understood the consequences. Ben Gurion said, if I were Palestinian, I'd hate Israel for what Israel has done to them, but we have to do this to take the land. But there are consequences for your actions. And as the old generation died out, the next generation came in and said, but we don't want to live in an Israel that's defined by perpetual conflict. And these were the Israelis that I fell in love with, to be honest with. I went to Israel extensively from 1994 to 1998, worked as Israeli intelligence on the Iraq problem. But in all my travels to Israel, I got to know these people very well. Tragically, I was in Israel when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, and I saw, the harm, the damage that had been done. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu didn't pull the trigger, but Benjamin Netanyahu created the political environment by being in bed with radical Talmudic rabbis who gave an order that condemned Yitzhak Rabin as a let me just fix the focus on that camera there. Condemned Yitzhak Rabin as I think they call him a follower, or there's some radical, law based upon Talmudic scripture that basically marked Rabin for death. And the assassin, who's a radical right-wing Israeli Orthodox, said, the rabbis have told me to kill this man as a threat to Israel, so they killed him. So we know that Israel was already imbued with this radical thing. And the irony was when I first started working in Israel in 1994, Saddam Hussein in Iraq was deemed to be the number one threat against Israel. But because of the level of our cooperation, I was able to convince the Israelis that that Iraq could be disarmed, that Saddam would allow Iraq to be disarmed, and that Israel and Iraq could live together in some sort of pragmatic driven peace. And they bought into it. And by 1998, when I was eventually evicted by the United States because of the success of our work, the Israelis, basically, Iraq had dropped to, I think, number 6 or number 8 on their list. Number 1 on the list, though, surprised me. It was radical Orthodox Jews. Was deemed to be in 1998 the number 1 threat to Israeli security, largely because of what happened to Yitzhak Rabin in 1996, but also keep in mind that or 1995, I think he was assassinated, that Israel was receiving hundreds of thousands of new immigrants from the former Soviet Union, from Russia, from Ukraine. And these immigrants came in, and you see the mindset that empowered Rabin was a mindset that said, we have to find a way to live in peace with the Palestinians. It's in our interest. When I was in Israel from 1994, 1996, every time I went to Israel, something horrible happened. And generally it was a Hamas-driven terrorist action. I mean, I had a restaurant we used to go to get blown up the day after I ate there. I went to a mall that was blown up a day after I shopped there. There was a discotheque, I think they call it the Aquarium or something of that nature. It was blown up with multiple casualties right next to the hotel that I stayed in. And these attacks were taking place all over. But the Israelis that I dealt with, I remember the first time this happened, a bus was blown up in Dizengoff. And I went to work the next day. I was driven to this Israeli military facility where we were doing the cooperation. And the Israelis there, in the Israeli intelligence service, a lot of their administrative staff are females, and they were crying their eyes out. And I said, look, we can take a day off. I mean, we can take as much time as you off. I don't want to be here. You're clear. And they said, no, we have to do this because this is the only path to peace. We have to engage. We have to work. We have to, pick ourselves up. We can't allow terrorists to corrupt us. That they have done an evil, but we need to work for peace. And for them, peace was learning how to peacefully coexist with their neighbors. But these people were people who were born in an Israel that understood that maybe the mindset of the founding fathers wasn't a healthy mindset, that maybe Nakba, forceful eviction of Palestinians, wasn't the right policy, that maybe a Palestinian state where the Palestinian people could live with dignity next to the Israelis in peace and prosperity, that might be the direction to go. But now and remember, Likud didn't want this. Netanyahu's party didn't want that. This is Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, and Labor saying this is what we want. But now you have these immigrants coming in, and they don't have the history of the native-born Israelis. They come in, and all they say is, first of all, they're very racist, and so they criticize the Palestinians as brown, as subhuman, and they say, no, we're all about Israel for Jews. We're all about this Jewish homeland. Let's kick these guys out, Muslims and Christians alike. Let's do this. And Likud started to make common cause with these radical right-wing parties that were absorbing these immigrants. And you see the political demographics of Israel change over time. I will tell you today that the Israel that exists today is not the Israel that I fell in love with back in the 1990s. I know there's people out there saying you should never have fallen in love with Israel. I'm sorry. I'm a humanist. Somebody who looks at people for their potential. And I saw in Israel the potential to make changes. That Israel no longer exists. It died out with Yitzhak Rabin. Benjamin Netanyahu fundamentally corrupted Israel and transformed it into this evil political Zionist entity that's all about slaughtering the Palestinian people and denying them their right for statehood. So that's what Israel has become. So when you have an Israel with this mindset, look at the man behind it, Benjamin Netanyahu. This is about existential survival, both as a nation. He's defined the defeat of the Palestinians as as an existential problem, but it's also for his political survival. He has made a deal with the devil in terms of the coalition, the governing coalition, where he has to do certain things to do it. But here's the irony of it all. On October 6th of last year, Netanyahu was winning. People keep going, well, he's insane, he's suicidal. No, it's not insanity. It's cruel, it's criminal, but it's not insanity. Look what was happening. Israel, through the Abrams Accord, negotiated with the Trump administration, had eliminated any possibility of there being a Palestinian state, and the Arab world bought into it. Now, they didn't buy into it by saying, we support this. What they said is, we don't support the Abrams Accord in terms of the West Bank settlements, and we'll have to talk about that. But part of the Abrams Accords were to normalize relations between Israel and the Gulf Arab states to create a broader framework of coexistence that was built not upon fighting over Palestinian issues, but on economic co-prosperity. Joe Biden went to India for the G20 summit last summer, and he stood up in front of the world and said, here's my big plan. We are going to create the India-Middle East Economic Corridor. And again, for the Chinese audience out there, they were creating it to attack you, to block your Belts and Roads initiative. This was the big American counter strategy. Just a little deviation here. The last time I checked, though, the ports that they were going to come in were ports that had been built up by the Chinese as parts of the Belt and Roads Initiative. The trains they were going to rely on to make the connectivity were built by the Chinese as parts of the Belt and Roads Initiative. Haifa harbor in Israel, that was going to be the cornerstone of the Israeli environment, it was built by the Chinese, and they were going to a harbor in Greece that was built by the Chinese. So it seemed to me that this grand scheme was actually sort of dovetailing on the success of the Belt and Roads Initiative. But don't tell Joe Biden. But it wasn't just Biden broadcasting this. The Arab countries saying this is what we want. The Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu, went to the United Nations General Assembly debate, and instead of holding up a cartoon diagram of an Iranian bomb saying Iran's about ready to blow up the world, he held up a map that said this is how Israel's going to live. And they came this close to doing it. The United States was putting pressure on Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Arabians were this close to normalizing relations. Indonesia, this close. The whole world was ready to cave in, where there would never be a discussion about a Palestinian state again, ever. Israel would now become part of this grand economic interconnectivity that was designed to contain Iran, built around Sunni Arab states like Saudi Arabia would have been the cornerstone of this. But then a couple things started happening. One, darn you Chinese and your diplomacy. Instead of letting America put the Sunni up against the Shia in a permanent conflict-based scenario in the Middle East that would make American defense contractors very happy and emphasize the value that Israel brings to the partnership through its intelligence and military supremacy, you went and negotiated peace between the Saudis and the Iranians. Shame on you. Why don't you share our vision of the world? Why don't you want conflict-based interconnectivity? I don't understand the Chinese mentality. You want peace. That's very naive of you. But you went in there and you negotiated this wonderful deal between the Saudis and the Iranians. And then on top of that, you got them both to get accepted into BRICS. So not only did they make peace, but now they're part of a larger forum where they're talking about working together in common cause towards greater economic co-prosperity. You guys, but still, you didn't defeat the Israeli plan, because they were on the cusp of shutting down Palestine, talk about Palestine, and inserting themselves as part as the not just exceptional, but they were a mandatory element of this broader strategy that without Israel, it couldn't happen. October 7th changed all this. October 7th, Hamas shredded everything. And they now created a situation where, Palestinian state is on the front burner of everybody. Everybody's talking about Palestinian state. Israel's on the defensive. Instead of being the integral element of this grand co-prosperity, the whole world has turned on Israel, diplomatically isolated Israel. They've been exposed for what they are. But the reason why I brought it up is on October 6th, Israel was winning. You can say whatever you want about Benjamin Netanyahu. Don't call him insane, because he was winning. He was on the verge of victory. This is why October 7th is so important, because October 7th was literally a global game changer, changed everything. But now we have Israel now reacting. They were so close to victory. Imagine that. You were almost there. You could just reach out and touch it. It's like me trying to climb Mount Everest, and I'm there, baby. 50 meters to go, and I run out of oxygen. My rope gets cut. The storm comes in, and I can't make it. That's what happened to Israel. October 7th was all the bad things that prevented them from summiting. And now they have to get down the mountain or die, but they want to make it to the top, and they're in trouble. So this is what Israel's dealing with. And we throw into that the fact that, remember, it's not just a national policy. This is a national policy driven by one man, Benjamin Netanyahu. This has become, Israel today is been shaped in the form and the person of Benjamin Netanyahu. So this is very personalized for him. His political activity today is linked to his personal survival. He's a man who's been charged with immense crimes of corruption, he and his wife, and they're guilty as hell. I know you're innocent until proven guilty, but he's guilty as hell. This is why when he came in, one of the first things he did as prime minister in this iteration was trying to shut down the Israeli courts to take him over. He rewrote basic law and was going to have the Knesset come in and appoint judges and fire judges, impeach judges, so that nobody could ever hear a case against Benjamin Netanyahu. That failed. And recall, before October 7th, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets protesting against Benjamin Netanyahu. A lot of these pilots today who are dropping bombs on Gaza and said, we will never fly in the IDF so long as this basic law change is going on because it fundamentally redefines us and all that stuff. Well, the Supreme Court overturned it. Netanyahu now knows that the moment he leaves office, unless he gets a pardon, he's going to court, he's going on trial, he's going to be found guilty, he's going to jail. So he can't just step aside and do the right thing. Most politicians at some point in time, Tricky Dick Nixon, one of the more corrupt individuals in American political history, he was confronted by the fact that the game was up, that it was over, time to go away, Tricky Dicky, but we're going to pardon you. You can wave your two fingers on the helicopter, but you're done, finished politically. Netanyahu's not going to do that. He can't do that. And so he now has linked his personal survival to his political survival, but his political survival is in trouble because of October 7th. October 7th, he presided over the worst national security failure in Israeli history until April 14th, which has become the worst national security crisis, because October 7th wasn't existential. It was just an embarrassment. I mean, Hamas didn't threaten to destroy Israel. Israel's threatening to destroy itself by its response to Hamas, but Hamas didn't threaten to destroy Israel. Hamas basically lured Israel into a trap of Hamas's design, and Israel then behaved as Israel is wont to behave. And now you have genocide. The world's recognized the genocide. You have an economy that's unsustainable. The Houthi have done a fantastic job of shutting down the Bab el-Mandeb straight, billions of dollars of economic damage. And so now Netanyahu is saying, the only way I can stay in power is to, because everybody recognizes that I've lost the war against Hamas. I've lost. I can't get the hostages back without a ceasefire, but once there's a ceasefire, the war is over, then I'm done. So I need to expand this conflict into Lebanon and against Hezbollah or against Iran. He needs this for his political survival. And this is where it gets very dangerous, because normal, rational people who think logically can game things out and say, well, it's not in Israel's best interest to do X, Y, and Z. But we're not talking about Israel's best interests. Israel's best interests have been subordinated to the personal political ambition of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's fighting for his political life. And right now, I believe he's come up with the recognition that unless he finds a way to deal with Iran's newly imposed deterrence supremacy, that he's politically finished. And then politically finished means he's done. He's 76 years old. I mean, he's in bad health. He's not going to live long anyways, but no man wants to, go gently into the night, to quote Dylan Thomas. He's going to rage against the dying of the light. And that's okay if you're just Netanyahu raging alone in a bedroom by yourself, die. But if you're going to take down the world with you, if you're going to literally become the living embodiment of the Samson option, and this is the scary part, because the Samson option isn't just a biblical reference to Samson taking down the temple. It's Israel's nuclear doctrine, that if the world turns against us, we take the world down with our nuclear weapons. Netanyahu has created an Israel that exists in his image. This is his Israel. The Likud party has been perverted into this religious right-wing insanity that speaks in existential terms, that if we don't save Israel, then there's nothing worth saving. We take it all down. And now we're taken into the next level of insanity, the potential of Israel to use nuclear weapons. And normally I would be dismissive of, but again, we're beyond normal parameters of discussion. We're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu and the insanity of a right-wing political system that embraces Amalek. Amalek is a biblical reference to the genocide of the Amalekites. I'm sure I've just butchered that name, Amalekites. Initially with Saul receiving instructions from Samuel, who claims he received instructions from God, but incomplete genocide later on completed by Esther, the Jewish princess or queen of Babylon, who basically authorized the slaughter of all surviving Amalekites and the seed of Amalek. Wiped them out, 75,000. It's celebrated in the Bible. Every year, the Jewish faithful celebrate it in Purim, a big holiday that says it's good to annihilate the seed of Amalek. Now, biblical things and all that stuff, let's put it away for a second, except that it's turned into policy. When the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaks about, we know about Amalek, we know our history, we know what to do, and the Israeli soldiers chant, we will annihilate the seed of Amalek. We will wipe them out. We will commit genocide. And then they carry out actions in Gaza, which have been defined by the International Court of Justice as, supporting a case of genocide. I mean, this is a criminal enterprise. This is a morally corrupt entity that doesn't think rationally, and it's built around the person of one man whose survival depends upon war. So if the man's talking about committing genocide, that means that he probably would be more than happy to say, well, then if we're not able to annihilate the seed of Amalek, then we'll annihilate the entire world. The Samson option will kick in. God will purify the world, and whatever comes forward will be good and just in the eyes of God and the Lord. I don't want to get too religious here, but I mean, this is the mindset of Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's very frightening because it's the mindset of a fanatic, not of a rational player.
I understand Netanyahu and his motivations want to keeping the conflict going, but why did the defense establishment of Israel decide to go along with Netanyahu's plan? I mean, not everybody in the Israeli defense establishment see eye to eye with Netanyahu politically, but yet some of them are even more bloodthirsty than Netanyahu in wanting to expand the conflict. Why is that? I'm more baffling about that.
It's really not that baffling. When you think about it, who oversees the promotions of the military at the senior levels? Civilian leadership. So Benjamin Netanyahu has been a consistent part of Israel's senior-most political establishment, either as prime minister, defense minister, foreign minister, etc. He's been there. And so over time, he has shaped not just the senior leadership, but once you shape a senior leadership and it's sustained over time, the mid-level management says, in order for it to get promoted, I have to endorse certain policies. And so once the mid-level management then shapes the doctrine, shapes the mindset, shapes the philosophy of the IDF, those who come in are shaped by it as well. It pushes its way down. Then you add on to that things such as there's a program in Israel. It's a conscript-driven army. As Israel became more fundamentalist, Orthodox Jewish, you ran into a situation where many Orthodox Jews say we don't have to serve in the military. We get the exception, the exemption. But if you do that, and if everybody just declares themselves to be Orthodox, nobody goes in the military. It's a conscript-driven military. So the Israelis came up with this solution where you have yeshivas that do Talmudic studies And so all these Orthodox Jewish men are saying, well, I want to become a Talmudic scholar. I want to, imbue myself in that. But the Israelis said, well, you can't avoid military service. So they create reserve units drawn from men who do a 5-year period of a commitment for 5 years in the IDF, but they're Talmudic scholars. So their primary mission is to be Talmudic scholars, but their secondary mission is to drill and become reservists. These are the guys that are fighting in Gaza. These are the guys holding their hands, jumping up and down, saying the seed of Amalek. These are religious fanatics who view they take orders from Israeli rabbis, radical right-wing rabbis that call the Palestinians Amalek, give them justification for annihilating them, create a mindset where it's okay for a sniper to shoot a mother holding the hand of a child crossing the street with a white flag flying. They shoot them. The mindset allows snipers to produce T-shirts that show a pregnant Arab woman and says 1 shot, 2 kills. A mindset that allows the Israelis to shoot up a vehicle, leave a 6-year-old girl alive, allow her to make a phone call to lure in 2 paramedics before killing them all. This mindset is the mindset of the Israeli Defense Force, because the Israeli Defense Force over the course of several decades has become corrupted by this right-wing fanatic ideology driven by Benjamin Netanyahu and these right-wing parties. The Israeli Defense Force isn't the most moral army in the world. That's what the Israelis like to sell it as. It's the most immoral army in the world, because they have taken this attitude of, we are the supermen, we are God's chosen, the rest of everybody are human animals. When you have an Israeli Minister of Defense and Chief of Staff and all the officers underneath referring to the Palestinians as human animals, you have a problem. Because if the generals view them as animals, then that is pushed down to the soldiers who view them as animals, and then they treat them as animals, and there's no punishment, because there's no punishment for shooting a stray dog. It's not a violation of the laws of war to shoot a stray dog or a rabid beast, and that's how they view the Palestinians. And there's no moral repercussions for the vast majority of these people, because they're so thoroughly corrupted by their ideology that they don't reflect on what they have done. I'm not saying America's perfect. We're not. And I'm not saying American troops never committed crimes. We have. But I will tell you this: the vast majority of Americans who committed those crimes today are suffering. They're suffering morally. They're suffering because they reflect on what they've done, and they recognize that what they've done is wrong. What they've done is evil. What they've done doesn't reflect what America should stand for. It doesn't justify what they did, but at least they have enough conscience to feel guilty about what they've done. There's no guilt in Israel today for anything that they've done against the Palestinian people.